Hello, parents, grandparents, future parents, and curious minds. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steven.
And I'm PJ.
And this is Dad's Discuss. So, PJ, latest topic. Probably stale by now when we release the episode, but, our great state of Alabama decided to, say embryos outside of the uterus are now people, and IVF is a problem.
Yes, and I think anyone who has, not been living under a rock, no offense, probably understands that this has happened, and it certainly brings with it many controversial and heated opinions on both sides.
So now you can just come to our podcast and find out how we're struggling with it.
Absolutely.
But not really, because luckily it doesn't affect us in our households, at least for now, in the time being. At least my household's been blessed with the ability to, create life and only have a few rough stepping stones along the way. But I know a lot of households, and a personal friend of mine struggled with this and had to fight through it.
Yep, and I think almost everyone probably has similar experiences. It may not have personally affected them, but they know of someone, or they know someone who, were able to start their family due to in vitro fertilization. It's funny to me how the government does have a tendency to mandate different things with, in my opinion, not a full understanding of how things operate.
True.
Yep.
Yeah, because, even I don't understand how the full concept operates. I usually try and bite my tongue if I've never experienced something before. But now that we have a podcast where we talk about all the things in the world, I've got to at least develop some sort of opinion on it.
Yes, don't bite your tongue on your microphone, Stephen.
Yeah. But I guess the concept is, implanting, or you get X number of embryos, right, outside of the woman's body and culture them to where they can go back in and have a higher chance of success for implantation, right?
Yep. And I think, a lot of people will say that this comes down to like a moralistic view of how you see embryos, sperm cells, fertilized eggs, and things of that nature. But the problem I have with, the state's decision is I don't think that they are truly using moralistic views in their decision. I really do feel like their position was solely due to a political nature.
Right.
And trying to spite the other guys, if you will.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't read too much into it as far as that goes. I was mostly reading into the bill and like what it was causing and all the drama. But
oh yes. Well, I think as our listeners may or may not have picked up on, both myself and Stephen, grew up in the Catholic Church. And its views on IVF is the same as its views on, typical contraception, is that, it's not an approved practice.
Right.
But I don't necessarily feel that the decisions made by the Alabama state government were due to the moralistic reasons of why IVF would be considered unnatural. To me, it was just, well, I'll just go ahead and say this. Democrats are in favor of such things, so we want to be against it.
Yeah. Purely a political attack sort of thing, rather than we've thought this out and we feel like we should really protect the embryos.
Exactly. Yep.
But then the thing I struggle with is people who turn to IVF are people that those aren't going to be lives anyways. So morally, how wrong is it to use the technology to create life where there couldn't have been life to begin with?
Right. And my personal opinions on it is I understand like why our church would teach that it would be, unnatural or against the dogma. But I also have seen the immense joy that it has brought parents who otherwise would never have been able to have a child. And unlike other types of situations where something may be said, well, they're just doing it for their own personal benefit, I don't feel like the types of people that seek out IVF are the types of people that are very selfish. I do feel like they legitimately have good intentions, would like to be good parents, but just have, unfortunately, not been able to conceive through a natural process.
Yeah. And the selfish reasons, I don't get that argument. I'd have to hear somebody lay that down for me, because I'm definitely not going to go out there and spend several thousands of dollars to
Exactly.
try and have a kid of my own. I'd be like, well, I'm just going to go on more vacations. God tells me I can't have kids.
Yeah, I don't think anyone who goes through that process is thinking selfishly. They want to do it because they really would like to have a family of their own and just have not been able to.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like we're pretty close on the same page, but there are definitely, we both have talked about, seeing the reaction to it and how people have very strong opinions on the other side.
Oh, yeah, very, very strong.
It's definitely one of those concerning things where, you love to buy into a political system that has done a lot of good for the nation, but also a lot of harm sometimes.
Yes, yes. And a lot of it does come down to personal beliefs as well. Everyone every day is getting fed information from various multiple sources. How do you process that, and what conclusions do you yourself come to? You don't want someone dictating your every thought, but you also want to weigh the various opinions to form your own.
Yeah. Yep. That's what we are in life, is I think, therefore I am, right?
Well, if I don't think, does that mean I disappear?
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Now we're getting into philosophy.
Thank you, Descartes. Now, on a more personal note, even though I do know of the success stories, as I mentioned before, I understand the church. And when I say the church, I mean the Catholic Church's teaching. I do understand their position, and would probably say that I lean more towards the not being a fan of it aspect, but have always been someone who thinks that religion is a personal conviction, and I am never going to tell someone don't do this or do that due to my own personal religious beliefs.
Yeah. That's the danger of a theocracy, right? Is if one religion is ruling all, then you have stuff like the Dark Ages happening.
Exactly. Yep.
Because no human's perfect, so no religion's perfect, right?
Very, very true. I do believe that. But as someone who is religious, I myself want to keep to a high moral standard, but I have no right, in my opinion, to force someone else to that same moral standard.
Through a law.
Through the government.
Or by the sword, right?
Yep. Well, I don't have any swords. I have a couple knives. Does that count?
I have several swords.
Oh, well, let me borrow one of yours. Okay.
I got a nice metal crafted Spartan sword.
Fancy schmancy.
Oh, but yeah, that is the existential problem of trying to, that just boils down to evangelizing over dictating, right?
Yes.
You can't rule as a dictator. You're not going to get very far. But you can evangelize.
You can, yep. And there are, as in any aspect of life, right and wrong ways to go about doing it.
Yeah. But that is one topic that you could enlighten me on, is what's the church's, moral argument for it not needing to be in existence, I guess.
Well,
because I haven't gone too deep in it.
Yeah, so I'm not going to speak directly for the church, but the teaching falls in line with their teaching on contraception, which I think most people are pretty versed enough in to know that the Catholic Church is against all forms of unnatural conception. And IVF being a type of conception where you are not physically in the act of procreating, but you use a scientific method to create a child. The claim is that you are taking God out of the equation, that you are using modern technology in order to create life without the naturalistic process.
Okay, that's interesting to me, since the church has always been like pretty science oriented. And so with it being so family oriented too, I would have thought, creating life would have been above contraception, which is trying to prevent life, but
Yep.
interesting. Because
Yeah.
you're not because I always thought, masturbation too is considered a waste of life, and those contraception and masturbation I'm on board with because it makes sense and it's helped me in my life, and I've really grown as a person from it and living by that standard. But the IVF feels like a weird argument, and maybe I need to just read what they're thinking and if they've
Fully thought it out.
thought it out, or if it was just a blanket statement because it could be used in harmful ways, sort of thing.
Yep. I haven't done enough research on it myself to know the difference, but I do think that, as in a lot of other topics, they do have minds much smarter than myself that have delved
Right.
into this. I don't think that it was just a blanket statement, if you will.
Yeah. A lot of the theorists and dang, I'm losing my mind. I'm trying to think of the word, but the people that just think about moral arguments all day.
Philosophers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably sitting there trying to figure it out themselves, but
Yep.
I don't know. I do the same thing myself, and I just can't argue myself into believing that it's wrong, that it can be used wrong, but there's a lot of tools that can be used wrong. But if you're sitting there trying to create life in a home on this earth, I don't see the negatives in it still. I'll read more. We may have a different Steven in another episode, but that's why we're here.
We are, yeah. We're always trying to grow and better our understanding of everything, especially related to the topics of parenting. And I don't foresee that being something that's going to go away anytime soon. So,
Yeah.
that certainly increase your knowledge so that you can be better equipped to either talk or present your opinions later on.
Yeah, and there's probably plenty of IVF parents that might listen to this and need some insight, but I say good on you, and I'm glad you got a kid, and I hope you treat him well and maybe grow with this podcast.
Yes, yes. And I think, as you mentioned, a lot of tools are made for a certain purpose, but can be misused. If I were to have to say how this could potentially be misused, would probably be in that apparently you have, a sperm and you have an egg unfertilized, and, you put them together to make one become viable. And once it is, then you reimplant it into the uterus.
Mm-hmm.
For the ones that do not become viable, they're discarded, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that is where the moralistic
Right.
aspect comes into play. The church talks about how every time an egg is fertilized, that is the moment of conception.
Right.
Yep. So if there is a moment of conception, but then it's not quote unquote viable, and you discard that, then it is, essentially, throwing a life away.
Yeah. And maybe the church would be more on board with it if it was a blanket cause that if you have 3 that are viable, all have to go in and you have to be open to triplets.
Very true. Yep. And I do not understand the science aspect near enough. I'm a numbers guy, not an anatomy guy.
Right. Yeah, because my understanding viable from the little research I've done, neither of us were just parents trying to learn as much as we can about the world, but neither of us were just parents trying to learn as much as we can about the world, but even if it's a viable egg doesn't mean you're getting a kid.
Yes.
So they're going to put the most viable in there. And the moral argument for me was people starting to tinker with which one's going to give me what type of kid, sort of thing. And then you're playing God at that point.
Yeah, almost as in like trying to choose the best traits.
Right.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay. But the more I learned about it, it was like, okay, you have so many viable, and one might be more than the other one. And you're going to always, if you have the right heart, you're always going to go with the one that has the greatest chance of survival. So at least that's in my mind.
But that could be considered a utilitarian concept.
Yeah. True. Yeah, some people might still go for the less viable one to get the genetics they want.
Yeah, certainly a lot that could go into this. And as I've mentioned, I do not have a full understanding. So welcome any and all comments and
Roast
messages.
us if you need to.
Yes, please. If we are completely wrong, if you feel like we have said something absolutely incorrect, call us out on it.
Yeah. Or give us more information. I'm not opposed to reading studies or religious statements or books.
Absolutely.
It's got to be an audiobook because no one has time to sit down and read anymore.
So you don't want to read, you want to listen.
I want to
Okay.
listen. Yeah, I need to listen to arguments. Reading arguments don't fit in my schedule. We had a fitness podcast and talked about how I have limited time, but when I do my fitness routines, I have a podcast or an audiobook in my ear. So
That makes sense.
that's when I learn, is when I grow, I guess you could say.
Yep. And then the technology nowadays is amazing, for the fact that we do have the option of in vitro fertilization, but also in that aspect, just being able to have something in your ear and being able to learn without having to, sit down and read a textbook or
Yeah.
any type of media like that.
And the best, learning, man, I love our side tangents, guys. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to go on another one here, but yeah, I've started a book. I haven't finished it, but it's about the question why and how humans need to learn to ask why more often, because when you start to be able to read, you can learn on your own and you can grow on your own, and you can see a dip off of kids once they get to, I think it's like the 3rd grade level. Once they start reading, they stop asking why so much. And so the book's all about, you need to go out and ask why more often, because you learn more that way than you do reading any book, sort of thing.
Are they saying that the drop off is caused by kids learn how to read for themselves and start searching for answers without it? Oh,
more independent learning. Yeah.
Interesting.
So reading's great. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the book is trying to dismiss reading at all. I think it's trying, I haven't finished it, obviously, but I think it's trying to say, don't give up on your curious mind and always question things like we're doing here today.
Of course. So to bring it back to the topic at hand, as I mentioned, I do feel like it was more politically motivated rather than we've thought this through and feel like this is the main reason why we're choosing to do this. As someone who is Catholic but has, multiple friends and acquaintances who are not, but more along the lines of some of the Protestant denominations, the concept of life beginning at conception is not universally thought of.
Right.
Yep. And so it struck me, for someone living in Alabama, where I know that most of the legislators are not Catholic, that they would try and say that this is their position due to religious or moral grounds.
That's a good point.
When I know that is not necessarily the case.
Yeah, they're not Catholic and not all Protestant.
Yep, and they
every
certainly do.
Religion believes the same.
Exactly. They certainly don't have any qualms with using other forms of contraception.
Right. Interesting. That is a good point there. Thing that struck me just now while you're mentioning that is, I can see why people struggle with life beginning at conception, since, most common occurring miscarriages happen in that first 6 weeks or so. So it's like your baby could still die.
Yep.
And you don't know if that life's going to exist or not. And so it's hard. You can struggle. Miscarriages are a rough thing to go through, and I don't wish it upon anyone, because it sucks. And especially for, your wives. You as guys don't have any idea what they go through for that, but I know it really hurt our family once. So.
Yep. Just the mental anguish that it could put anyone through.
Yeah, and the body hormones already start to change and prepare for life and everything. It's just nasty business.
Yep. The concept of, we're gonna delve into a few tangents here that I don't think was originally intended, but
I love tangents.
Now, the concept of, life being created at conception too is still under debate between many theologians and people who even aren't of religious context. I know I've heard the argument, and I can't say that I disagree with them. If you pull straight from the Bible, there's a quote in scripture that says that life begins at first breath. And that's what a lot of the Jewish traditions believe. That would seem to contradict the life begins at first conception notion. We can also go into the government aspect of, we don't assign social security numbers to fetuses in the womb. We don't assign a social security number to a human being until after they are born.
I mean, we should, so that I can have some 529s already.
I'd like to have a couple of tax breaks for, the unborn, but still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be one of those questions that's never going to get answered in this country because no one's ever going to have the same opinion on when they believe that like a human becomes a human,
Exists, yeah.
exists.
Yeah, because if it ties back to that existential question of do you exist when you can think, then when's the brain's developed enough to where it can pass the neurons to cause a thought to occur, right?
Yeah, I may not even exist right now if that's the case.
Nothing's firing up above for you
Nothing's
right now.
going on upstairs. But yeah,
Interesting.
very, very, very deep concepts we're getting into. I like this.
Right. It's our first one, so we gotta go hard
That's right.
and hope there's many more because this is what I like to be challenged on and understand. I know that the two of us, for those listening, we're sent down here and we raised in similar households and the same religion and a lot of the same background and geographical locations.
For both of our spouses
Yeah,
too. So
yeah. So we have minimal exposure to the world if you think of it that way, but we try and think outside the box and meet everybody we can that comes through town and
yep.
get different perspectives and travel the world and understand more so we can hopefully not be one-sided, but at least for me, question things.
Oh, absolutely. I think that just makes everyone more well-rounded. And I never want to be someone that says, I believe in X, Y, and Z because this is what I was told. No, I want to be able to clearly say, I believe in X, Y, and Z because this is what I truly believe. I've researched it. I have the knowledge and understanding to say, I believe this because, not I believe this because someone else told me.
Right. It might get a lot more insight into me if you want to keep listening for a podcast, as mine's I can change if I want to.
Yes.
I can be convinced usually, and I have some pretty strong opinions on certain things, but I leave myself open to changing my mind if I hear a reasonable, convincing argument that pushes me to my limit. But
Yep.
like I said earlier with the IVF stuff, it doesn't seem like there's a moral high ground to stand on, but you've made some good arguments today that have me questioning.
Yep. And I think I definitely find myself in the camp. And for those that may be listening that are Catholic or have strong opinions, you can call me a cafeteria Catholic if you will. But I've done, at least in my mind, enough research to know what I feel like I believe. But I also fully understand why the Catholic Church teaches what they do. And I understand their reasonings for it. It's just whether or not I fully
embrace it.
Thank you. That's a good word. Yes. Whether I fully embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always something I struggled with growing up with a lot of hardcore Catholic people, to say the least, is you accept everything 100% or you're not Catholic, and that never vibed with me of being a Catholic. You shouldn't. I mean, sure, the religion's been around for 2,000 years, plus, obviously, we're past 2,000. But that doesn't mean it hasn't changed, and it won't change.
Right.
Things get learned, and we all experience the world.
As far as I know,
like-
for the first 1,500 years of, recorded history after Christ, everyone still had more of the geocentric model in mind of our universe rather than heliocentric. And I think, majority of us now, I won't say everyone, but the majority of those now understand that the heliocentric model is the correct model of our universe. And it did
some big words on a parenting podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. But,
we don't have a special guest from NASA on today. So.
We don't. We could always make that happen,
yeah.
though. We certainly learn as time goes on, and you should always be willing to tell yourself, I've learned something new. I may have not known this before, but this does help change my opinion on a certain subject because I've been able to gather more information about it.
Yeah. Well, anything you have left unsaid or want to say for the audience?
No, I I certainly am not a theologian. I'm just a father or dad discussing with another dad. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. I have my own personal convictions, but I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say as well.
I think you should inherit that part-time theologian hat, because that's the point of this podcast, is we're wearing different hats as a parent, and we may cross this bridge as our kids get older and try to start having kids.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. I'm about to start wearing a part-time theologian hat.
Sweet. All right, well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Dads Discuss.
Please like and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Also, comment any topics you would like us to discuss and share this with your friends and family.
Finally, if you would like to be on the podcast or discuss any topics, please reach out via our contact information below.